morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dave Crouch, and this is Policy Talks. It's a monthly show brought to you by the Williamson Chamber, affectionately known as Williamson, Inc. And we're happy to have you with us this morning. We've got a very informative show planned, and look forward to learning a lot more about our county school system and how they're adapting to the new world that we're in now. This is our second virtual show. We're all working remotely and learning how to Zoom to the places we need to be. And we hope that you enjoy the format. I want to welcome our audience with WCTV Channel 3. Creed Henderson and his team always make us look good, and we appreciate that audience. Also, Tom Lawrence and folks over at WAKM are live broadcasting this at the same time, and we want to say good morning to you folks. Our guests this morning are Dr. Jason Golden, the superintendent for the Williamson County School System. I've asked him to bring along his three key members of his team, Dr. Lee Webb, the assistant superintendent for secondary schools, Denise Goodwin, the assistant superintendent for elementary schools, and Darren Joins, our athletic director for the county. Just as a program note here, we aren't neglecting the Franklin Special School District. There is so much to cover between the two school districts. We've decided to have a 1 hour show for each one, and Dr. Snowden and I have talked about it, and we're going to bring him back later, closer to the time of school starting this fall, or at least we hope school is starting this fall, and when a few more questions have been answered, and have he and his team bring us up to date then. So with that, Jason Golden, you've been in office now about a year as the superintendent. You've been with the school district since '06, and as the attorney for the school system, you have dealt with a lot of issues, but nothing quite like what you're dealing with this year, I would say.
Well, I actually served just as a lawyer for the school district those first 3 years. And after that, I took responsibility for a lot of the operational areas and became the deputy superintendent just a couple of years after that. And you're right. We've never dealt with any issue like this. And I think that's true for lots of your viewers. It's really been an incredible change for everyone. We were talking a few weeks ago, trying to figure out when was the last time there's been this kind of disruption in our country. And it has to be wartime. You think back to some of our history. World War II was pretty disruptive. A lot of families' habits changed. There was so much rationing. Tires, rubber, metal, all those kinds of things. So a lot of travel back then dropped down. But even then, schools continued as they normally did, and in a format that's really not that different from what schools are doing in this country just in the last few years. So from a school perspective, it's been a huge disruption. It's not just a couple of days off like you might have even with an ice storm. It's been a major change for us.
Right. Some people are very concerned about the seniors and what all they're missing out on in their senior year. But the senior in my household, I don't think has missed a beat. He's gotten in a lot of hunting and fishing, and hadn't missed school too much. So unfortunately, we're going to have to readjust his focus again this fall, as probably a lot of other kids are going to have to do that too. Let's talk, first of all, Jason, about your original goals for 2020-21. Looking back at an interview you did then, you were talking about teacher recruitment, improving ACT scores, improving the safety at the school systems, opening a few new schools and some new buildings at different campuses. Give us an update on how all the normal things are going, or all the things that would have been happening in a normal year.
Well, sure. Number one, I'll talk about those logistical issues that you mentioned, kind of on the tail end of that. Williamson County continues to grow, and we've been going through this process a little bit less than 2 months, but from everything I've heard, Williamson County continues to grow. The county housing starts are still up. We've been tracking that. I've had a conversation with Matt Largent a few weeks ago. He's the CEO of Williamson Inc., the body that puts this show on. And from everything he hears from the businesses that recruit, that we're still growing. And so on the logistical end, the way we normally do school, we're still working. Legacy Middle School is scheduled to open, and that's on Henpeck Lane right next to Oakview Elementary School. So we've gone through the process of hiring teachers, and we are still optimistic about that facility being able to open, but COVID-19 has even affected that some. Contractors have to be careful with social distancing, and so the work slows. The nice thing is that is one of those essential tasks, and so there has still been some work, but staffing is tougher. There are some folks who need to stay home to take care of family who are ill. There are other issues related to that. There's a lot of fear out there, and I think a lot of it's reasonable fear based on the death rates that we've seen from COVID-19. Another issue related to that, and business people can confirm this, is the supply chain is tougher. So when you order materials, there may be some issues somewhere down that chain, from manufacturing to distribution and on up. And so some of our supplies have slowed down. This thing has affected so much more than schools. But with all that being said, we have a great contractor, R.G. Anderson. It happens to be the company that got the bid for that particular job, and they are working hard to get that together. It's funny, those routine things that you mentioned that used to just be such a concentration effort for us are not as big a worry anymore. Rain, as an example. When you do a construction project, rain is big. We've had a lot of rain, and it's still just as serious as it ever was, but it takes a back seat to some of those other issues we're dealing with that are things that used to be routine.
Right.
But that's still going. We're still able to do some additional projects. We're going to do renovation on Fairview Middle School over the summer. And we're working on actually trying to get a little bit of a head start on that because the buildings are closed. And so we always have projects knowing that we're growing on the facility side. So from a goal perspective, you're right. We talked about ACT scores. We talked about raising our test scores. The state declared that they weren't going to require any of those tests for obvious reasons. We're not in school. But the truth is that ACT continues because that is the gateway for students to get to college and have those opportunities that so many of our families want. One of the things that I think is really neat about this and neat about our faculty is early on with this, we put our ACT prep onto our system, onto our online system. Mm-hmm. And so we've been continuing with that ACT prep for students. And the state has actually eliminated the requirement that students this year take the ACT as a requirement for graduation. But just about most of our students have already taken that ACT. And so that hasn't had a big impact on us, that reduction of the requirement, because so many of our folks are focused on it. So we're still doing ACT prep online. And Dr. Webb may address this with ACT, but ACT has made some modifications as well. They've pushed the dates back. They've eliminated a couple of the tests that would have been going on this spring. And so we do have students still signing up and scheduled for the ACT. What we don't know is what the test results will bring, because it is new, but that's true for the whole country.
Right.
Everyone's facing that from an ACT perspective.
Now, you had STEM buildings underway at Brentwood High and Page. Are those fully operational and ready
That's
to go?
That's a great question. The STEM building at Brentwood High is fully operational, and Brentwood High and Brentwood Middle actually share that. That's been really good for us because there are a lot of middle school students who historically have traveled over to the high school to take a class. A handful of geometry students, language, as we differentiate. Instruction gives students more choices, and so those advanced opportunities have really been served well with that new STEM building at Brentwood High because it's on that campus and they can share. Page Middle has expanded. There's more room at Page Middle. Our long-term plan is for Page Middle to be able to hold 1,500 students. We're also doing some rebuild work at Page High. That building was built in 1976, opened in 1976, and I remember that because they're the Patriots. So I can't ever forget the year that Page High opened. They're the Patriots, 1976. And so we're excited about those massive renovations, and our county commission has been great to us. Our board has had a really good plan to plan for growth, and our county commission has been really good to fund us. And ultimately, it's our people, it's the community who make sure that we give good facilities to our students.
Now, there were a couple of buildings that I hadn't heard about in this interview that you did, Jason. An Independence Annex building, and then possible expansion plans at Centennial and Ravenwood. With Centennial being close to my heart, what are you looking at?
Well, so one of the things we talked about a few years ago with the county commission is managing the expense. It's a big expense to do school well. And it's funny that the human thought on those kinds of things has hit the back burner just in the last few weeks. But the reality is this is still going on because we will get back to that normal. And so one of the things we talked about with the county commission a few years ago is expanding schools, especially at the high school level where we can. It's a lot less expensive to add a wing onto a school if the core capacity can take it than it is to build brand new high schools. So we took a high school actually off our 5-year capital plan and instead put some expansions in. So Independence High School has been expanded. We opened up that wing this year. It's funny, it seems like years ago, but at the beginning of this school year, I was standing out front and speaking to media, and that construction site was over my shoulder, and it's done. We have more capacity in Independence. We have a plan on the books for Ravenwood. We're also doing that work on Centennial as well, to find spots and plans to build capacity by about 400 students or so per high school for those areas that are growing, because it helps us push off the need to have a new high school as long as we can.
Right. And the Grassland area is still slated to get a high school one of these days?
We do have in our 5-year capital plan, it's right at the back end of that 5-year capital plan. If I remember off the top of my head, we're projecting about 4 years out for what we are calling a Northeast High School. As Franklin and Centennial continue to grow, and even Independence, we have some families who live on the west side of Franklin who actually attend Independence. As those schools continue to grow, we project there is going to be a need in that part of Franklin. The Mac Hatcher interchange is being built and expanded on that west side, and so we project some growth in that area as that grows. So it's gonna serve West Franklin, Grassland. We haven't found a piece of land yet, but the zoning is going to depend a lot on where that land is, whether it's in the Grassland area or kind of further southwest from Grassland.
Lee Webb, did we leave anything important out of that discussion?
I don't think so. I think I'll just add on to Mr. Golden's comment about ACT. We do anticipate ACT coming back on board this summer. They are talking about doing some online methods. AP had already been doing online methods for their assessment, so it was pretty quick for AP, for our students who are taking those college classes at the high school level, to do their assessments online. ACT really didn't have a package to roll out quickly, but they are working on one. We'll see what happens. Our senior class is still averaging, just at right above a 25 average on the ACT, an amazing class of seniors, so impressive. And so our juniors who are still at home and working to fill their days with some academics, we have a lot of online resources, and we've actually, one of the courses we teach is ACT, and we have a course that students have access to online, and maybe they hadn't registered for that ACT class, but we do have the opportunity for every student in the district who wants to learn more about ACT to click and join and utilize all those online ACT resources that we have.
Those scores are very important to college entry, and so appreciate the effort y'all are putting into that, because it sure helps the pocketbook when you get to college. So
oh yeah. Hey, and that's, you actually mentioned the pocketbook. We're tracking our students' scholarship numbers. Traditionally, our counselors reach our seniors and say, okay, how much did you get? As we try to track that. And so we're tracking that in a different way with phone calls and emails, as opposed to catching a student in the hall or calling them down to say, hey, you got to tell me how much you got. So that's one thing we're tracking. Another thing Dr. Webb mentioned that a lot of folks may not know is AP classes, advanced placement classes. So many colleges will give college credit for students getting a particular score on an AP exam, an advanced placement exam. We have from freshmen to seniors taking AP classes. So even some of our freshmen, usually with AP Human Geography as an example, have already started tracking some credits for college. AP actually announced in March last month that they were altering their test this year to only test for about 75% of the material that's typically taught in an AP class. So they recognized nationwide that a lot of the content wasn't going to be taught or wasn't going to be taught in that same way. So our teachers, that you talk about some of those behind the scene things, our teachers were actually ahead of schedule compared to a lot of ACT schedules, because our teachers knocked that stuff out with instruction with our students. So they were really interested and excited about where we were with ACT, and with AP, and so our students have done a lot of good review. AP has online lectures. And I've heard from so many folks, especially in those first few weeks in March, we're ahead of this. The ones that they're recommending us read, our teachers already taught this, so it's review. So we were really encouraged in that example with that reminder of how well our teachers have been doing with advanced placement classes.
very good. Denise Goodwin, you're the assistant superintendent for elementary schools. How many elementary schools do we have in the county system now?
Thanks, Dave. We have 27 standalone elementary schools. When I say standalone, a couple of them are coupled with middle schools under one roof. And then we have one elementary group at Hillsborough. So when I talk about elementary, I say 28.
And her internet connection is
28 elementary schools.
right. Now, how long have you been the assistant superintendent in that area and with the school district in general, Denise?
I believe, Dave, I'm in my 28th or 29th year, almost 30 years with the district.
But who's counting?
That's true. And then I've been at the central office for about 10, 11 years now.
Okay. You've seen a lot of growth, and again, all the normal things kept you extremely busy just trying to keep all these new schools staffed, I'm sure, and so forth. But given the new world we're in, tell us how that's affected this year and then talk about next year. So.
Sure. It goes without saying it's been a challenge. Our traditional schooling has been excellent, as everybody across the state recognized. So what's happening is there's a lot of professional development changing in how our teachers will approach platforms for learning that will include remote learning. So that's a new challenge for our teachers, and they're all up for it. They're excited about it. But in regards to how we've served, we've tried to follow Mr. Golden's lead, students first, and then with a great deal of empathy for what's happening to our communities. When you think about 28 elementary schools and the leaders of their schools and our demographics in Williamson County, we serve a broad range of families. Mm-hmm. So what we've tried to do is make teachers individualize, reach out, check on families, not just for academics, but for how they're doing. The welfare of our communities is important. And the teachers are missing the students just as much as the students miss their teachers. So it's been a challenge, but we've been up for it. And we hope our parents understand we're gearing up, we're getting ready in case this pandemic continues, mm-hmm. or if we ever face another crisis like this. So our teachers are in new training, new learning. Our students are anxious to get back and see their teachers. I think we've done a remarkable job in a short turnaround period. And what I really liked about what Superintendent Golden did was we were measured in our approaches. We wanted to ensure the safety and security for all, the well-being of all, and continue the learning as best we could. For elementary schools, the major work of the grade levels truly comes to almost completion by the middle of March as we prepare for state testing. So we weren't too far behind, but we'll pick it up when school starts back and add the gaps, whatever was missed. And again, I will tell you, it's not much, Dave, and then we'll move forward.
Now, just in case this virus reappears, in earnest this fall, and how effective are the online or remote learning resources at the elementary level, and how have those gone so far this year?
Yeah, that's the big point of emphasis. K1 and 2 teachers, traditional schooling was aced. We got that, but the learning for the new remote is a professional development process. I think our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers were a little bit more comfortable with Google Classrooms. We are training now for, they said, I will probably not look at that word the same ever again in my lifetime when you say the word Zoom. But we are gearing up and helping our teachers get comfortable with the new realities.
Right.
Some of our more experienced teachers might remember Zoom as a TV show that was on PBS, but it's a very different thing now. And Denise mentioned at the younger grade levels, K1, K2. It has been a big shift, but we have had literally thousands of professional development sessions. If you count per teacher, with those video conferencing processes, with Google Classroom, which is a platform where students can communicate with their teachers and get direct instruction. It's been a quick change, but I think long term it's good that we've worked even harder on these tools so that it's one more tool in our toolbox when we go back to school.
Now, what about devices, computers, and things for the kids that do not have them in their homes already?
That's a great question. So early on, we started distributing Chromebooks, and Chromebooks are our basic portable device. to students, we distributed about 3,500 Chromebooks to our families. And so where we started was letting them know that if you need a device, come get it. And then we did multiple waves of that. And so the total that we've distributed is about 3,500. We did something that a lot of school districts didn't do. We made those available to every grade level, K-12. And so there's a lot of myths out there. You might read something, say, oh, a school district is doing blank, school district is doing something different. We did make sure that all our students from K-12 had access to those devices. Early on, we made sure that families had access to a number of apps. There's a lot of fun math apps, for example, that younger children can do. And so those are the numbers that we have. Now, we have 41,000 students, so 3,500 devices distributed. One of the plans we're working on long-term is, in the event this happens again, we want to make sure that we have more devices available to students. We're not one-to-one in the sense that we have enough devices for every student. We also, of course, like everybody else, have to cycle through devices as devices get old and have to be replaced. But from what I've seen from our families and their needs, given the combination of families having devices at home and us, in the event this happens again, I'm confident that we're going to be at or very close to folks having devices, because our families have been so good to help out. There's some districts across the country that do have one-to-one and assign them. In our strategic plan, we've been working on that. We actually had 2 schools this year that were piloting that. Our plan is this coming year to extend that to all high school students and assign them a device during the coming year. A lot of it has to do with purchasing and funding from the county commission. And so I do believe long-term this is going to be a big change.
Now, as we've noticed with Denise's connection, internet access in some parts of the county is better than others. And and there's some parts that have no internet access. Have you come up with creative ways to deal with that and help people? Or
well, the short answer is yes, but
school and do their homework, or how do we do this?
The short answer is yes, but I got to tell you a story. We had an online board meeting because the governor issued an executive order allowing for virtual meetings at least through next month. And we have a board member who lived in the rural area, Dan Cash, and he actually came to one of our facilities and sat in an office because he had trouble. And as we were talking about this, one of our Brentwood board members, Jay Galbraith, lost his connection, and he got back on and he said, oh yeah, my rural area of Brentwood, I lost connection. And so the reality is that I'm more concerned about connectivity and reliability of internet access than I am the devices, because of what we've learned in these last few months. And so one of the things we are considering in the event this happens again is that accessibility. So just having what we mentioned Zoom, just having Zoom interactive can't be the only thing that you do. We've added that on as a tool, but the Google Classrooms, where you have the platform for students to see the materials, to have those interactive relationships with teachers, is important, but we're going to have multiple tools. And that includes phone calls, emails, those exchanges that happen on the computer that might not have the timing disruption that you might face.
Right.
With all that being said, we are working on some things. As soon as this hit, we had communications with internet providers across the county, and on our website we have links. A lot of internet providers, at least in the short term, have given free internet access with Wi-Fi at home. Good. But what we've also found is more of our families have cell service than they have Wi-Fi. And so one of the things that we've done is gotten this product. The actual brand name of this product that we have is a Kajeet, Kajeet, and there's a lot of them out there. But it's basically a hotspot so that families can use that to bump up their bandwidth, bump up their accessibility. And so for those families who have that need, we're in the process of ramping that up to give them more access through devices such as that. But there are some areas of the county that really don't even have Wi-Fi. And so that we're able to do that with Khajiits. We're also scheduling a survey of our families to find out how their connectivity has been, and we're going to send that out in about the second week of May to give families some time to really experience what it's like to do this online interactive, so that we can get a better handle on the scope of the need here in the county.
Denise, are there any other messages that you want to get out to your parents and students this morning?
The only thing I can think of, Dave, is we're trying really hard to serve and serve well still. And teachers should be parents' first point of contact if they have concerns or if they want more information about how best to serve that child.
Yeah, great. Dr. Lee Webb, now the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools here in the county. I teased you a little earlier before we went on the air about high schools being secondary to something else, but I found out you're secondary to the primary schools and not to any other kind of education. You've been in the job, what, 2 or 3 years now?
This specific position, this is my second year. I was Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources for 1 year when I first came to central office, but second year in this role.
Right. You were the bomb.com principal at Centennial High School before you came to the central office, and everyone over there still misses you. But what do you see as the pros and cons of being an assistant superintendent versus being a principal?
Well, I'm going to tell you, being a principal and being a teacher, those are two of the most amazing jobs that you can have, I think, in the whole country. You know, working every day, interacting directly with students. In our positions, unfortunately, that direct interaction with students doesn't happen on a day-to-day basis. We're in the buildings and we're interacting, one moment at a time, but you're not immersed in these positions that we're in the lives of the students like you are as a principal. The first probably month or two that I was at central office, I was trying to figure out, what's wrong with me? You really don't know how much you get your own personal bucket filled up every single day when you're surrounded by 2,000 kids and you're going to pep rallies and you're slapping high fives in the hallway and you're celebrating. This is probably shocking to a lot of your viewers. There are no pep rallies at central office. No one's chants your name when you come into the office. It's
Jason,
a different environment.
I'll make a note of that. We'll add that.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome back at Centennial anytime you want to come get a recharge. This year is they didn't teach you how to deal with the situation you're in this year in your doctoral programs, I don't think. And what are you learning? What are you learning about the adaptability of the kids, of the teachers, of the system? How is that going so far, just this school year?
Well, what I'm learning for sure is that the structures that we have in place that are the foundations of how we do business are critical when a crisis occurs. Many business people who may be watching or who live in the business world versus education, you know that teamwork and collaboration are key in any environment. We're in a collaborative school district, so we encourage teachers and principals. You don't work in isolation. You don't teach in isolation. The days of going into your classroom and shutting the door and doing your own thing, those are well in the past. Mm-hmm. And I've been certainly thankful of the collaborative nature of the professionals in our district more now than I've ever been thankful before, that's for sure. When we first were encountered with, what do? We find out today that our whole world has changed for the unknown amount of time. We rely on those basic foundations of collaboration. One of the first things that we did was let's get every school and what we call curriculum teams, each team of teachers that teach the same content area at the same grade level. Let's get them all together and let's establish who is the lead. And some of those already have leads. Who's the lead of each of those schools, each of those grade levels, each of those content areas and let them be the spokesman of that content area for their school, and pull those leads together and collaborate. Pull the best resources that Centennial High has in English 1, and let's pull the best resources that Brentwood High has for English 1, and let's bring all those people together and create a platform of all of our best resources together. And let's create a website so that all teachers can have access to the same great resources, the very best. So we identified what are those essential standards that we haven't taught yet that need to be taught. And let's create a site where the best resources, the best activities, all are together, and push them out to all of our students in that content area. So that's the very first thing that we did. And thinking about how to utilize them, then each individual teacher could then think about where were they when the world kind of stopped for us in March, and create a pacing guide of where to start with those resources. So maybe in my English class at Centennial High, we would start with the third topic because we'd already covered the first two, but at Brentwood High, maybe they start with the fourth one or the first one, depending on where they were. So certainly what we learned is that thankful for the resources and the foundations that we operate on so that we could rely on them in a time of crisis, that's for sure.
The how effective are bless you, how effective are remote learning resources? Are you finding those? I mean, and I'll give you a pass here because, you know, I live in the same house with a high school senior. The teachers have been very proactive in reaching out and offering opportunities to learn, but high school seniors aren't necessarily, that's not their focus when they're not in a school building. So how do you engage them? How do you think that's gonna go going forward?
Well, engagement is all about relationships, and our teachers and students and principals and staff. I think one of the strengths that we have in Williamson County, the relationships that we have for students, with students and with families. So just we just encouraging teachers to continue to reach out, because the needs in the Crouch home for your senior may be different than a Webb senior that they may have and all across the district. So we're just encouraging to continue to reach out, figure out what kind of engagement each student needs. You know, our seniors are in need of finalizing their scholarship plans, their college applications. Those acceptance letters are coming in. They have decisions to be made. So what one student needs may vary from house to house. So continuing to have communication is what we're encouraging.
Very good. Now graduation is going to be a little different this year, it sounds like. You did a survey last week to see what the appetite was for different graduation options that you've got. What did you learn from that, and where are we?
Well, as parents and as school leaders, we anticipated that families and students wanted to walk across the stage and have that live opportunity, whether it means waiting or whatever CDC will allow us to do. Our instinct was that that's what families wanted, but we wanted to give them the opportunity to share their voice, and man, they shared it. We had over 5,000 responses, and over 85% of our families and students said, please let us walk across the stage and have that celebratory moment. So much has been non-traditional about this group of seniors. You think about a group that was born into 9/11, graduating in a global pandemic, everything that they had planned, spring semester of senior year. Think about that. I mean, that's big time. You know, that's where a lot of great celebrations happen. It's kind of a milestone that kids look forward to, and none of it's happened in a traditional way. So we've heard from our students and families, let us have this one traditional moment if any way possible. And let me tell you, we're gonna try our best to make it happen for students. So we have we're working right now as a district to try to establish some venues for those traditional ceremonies. And as you can imagine, venues are a little hesitant right now to make confirmation of celebrations for July for mass crowds. So we also have a backup of our football stadiums being a venue for us. July football stadium, whew, there's a lot of heat that comes with that. So we're trying to be cognizant of the time of day, what our first choice venue would be, our second choice venue. And if we get to the football stadium, putting it at a time of day where there's maybe a nice breeze without the sun beating down on us, and give students the opportunity to, hear their name called. One of my favorite days as a principal was graduation day. And seeing even the most confident and squirrely of students standing tall and sticking his hand out or her hand out to get their diploma and smile with their family cheering. What a proud day it is for our families. And I agree. We want to make that day happen for our students.
Well, I think there may have been a gender bias to the respondents on your survey. Judging from our household, but mom was certainly in favor of the celebration, and the guys, we're a little less worried about that. But just looking forward to hearing how that all plans out. Darren Joins, we better go ahead and move to you, and then we'll come back and take as much time as we have left to talk more about remote learning. But did I say Joins? I think I did. Darren, you
yes, you did.
You've been athletic director now almost a year, and you were a pretty successful basketball coach prior to that, though. I understand first in at Beach High School up in Sumner County, and then later a few years here at Franklin High School. I guess ask you the same thing I asked Lee. What's the difference between being an administrator versus being a coach? A lot of different stimulations there, I would say.
Well, Dr. Webb said it well. I mean, you do realize that that relationship piece, with not only the students, but also your fellow teachers. You're kind of in a foxhole together, so to speak. You do miss that. You really do miss it. So, and I'm probably still, in some respects, getting over that a little bit. And I do have an opportunity to go out to different games, visit the schools, visit the coaches. So I do get it that way. But really, it's hard to replace that everyday relationship you have with your students in class, your team, and your fellow teachers. So that's been an adjustment for sure.
What does an athletic director do at the county level, Darren?
Well, I think the thing that's the most noticeable to the public, at least, is the marketing or promotion part of it. My background is a marketing teacher also. I taught marketing for 23 years as well to go along with my coaching. But I think what people see is maybe what happens through the show we do here with WCTV, Creed and his crew, Sports Connection, the game day activities, the Wilcos, the big ESPYs-like event at the end of the year, the different things we do through our website and social media. I think it's something you notice, but really there's a lot more than that goes on that's more behind the scenes. It's more administrative-like. One of my biggest jobs is really to support those coaches. Mr. Golden does a great job of talking about putting students first. In my opinion, the way I do that is to support those coaches. If I can support the coaches and the athletic directors the way I should, and sometimes that's just listening. They may want to call me and say, look, I've got this issue, and you just listen to what they have to say, because, I've said this many times, as a coach, sometimes it's a pretty lonely world at times. It's not like everybody's always on your side, so to speak. The coach is a tough role in a lot of ways. So that's a big part of my job too, is just listening to them, the ideas that they have, letting them vent, which does happen from time to time, believe that or not. That's a big part of that job too, that maybe the public doesn't see.
Well, I was amused when I was reading an interview that you did with Joe Williams over at the Williamson Herald shortly after you were appointed the athletic director. And he quoted you as saying, a good leader makes only subtle changes in the first year, but you've made a lot more changes than just subtle changes this year. Maybe not because you wanted to, though. Tell us, I mean, there's been no spring sports, obviously,
Right.
but you've had to make contingent plans in case they did come back over and over again, it sounds like. But what is there anything left to the 2019-20 sports year? I mean, is it all just done, or is there something more to come to finish out the year?
Well, to answer a little bit what you said there initially about those changes, you know, my predecessor, Jeremy Qualls, did a great job in this position. He really did. And so I know Dr. Webb and I talked about this early on, that really I think any leader, but in particular one that's taken over a position where it's going really well, you'd be making a mistake to just come in and try to put a flamethrower to everything that's been going on. So I've tried to what I would call keep it between the ditches a little bit here this first year, take a look at what's been going on in the past, try to keep those events in place that we've had before, and then maybe put my own personal touch to it. And then to what you alluded to, then early March hits, and now we've got to make some adjustments, and I've had to face some things just like the coaches and athletes have at the school that's a little bit different. So that has been a little bit of a challenge. In terms of the sports, the games themselves for the spring sports are over, but TSSAA, which is our governing body, earlier in the week, they came out with a statement, I don't know if you saw this, that basically said the sports calendar will remain. And what that basically addresses is this: in terms of things like spring practice for football, basketball, off-season conditioning, TSSAA is going to keep the same calendar. That also includes summer practice and the dead period. The dead period, as you know, have an athlete in your family, is that last week in June, first week in July, where we have no contact. So TSSAA has said we're going to keep that calendar. Now, for us, obviously it looks a little bit different, and really throughout the state. This means now if we're going to have one of our spring practices, that has to be a Zoom practice, so to speak. So if I'm Matt Kreisky out at Centennial High School, maybe I'm meeting with the offense, and we're having a Zoom meeting, and we're talking about skill development, offensive scheme for the upcoming year, and that counts as a practice day. So our coaches have done a pretty good job of adjusting to this. Obviously, it's not going to replace being in front of someone. And then I think the athletes themselves, you see all kinds of things on social media where they're working out and they're showing that, hey, I'm still trying to stay in shape and do those kind of things. Again, not the same as being there with the coach, but I think we have tried to make some adjustments there, not only as coaches, but also as athletes as well. But that calendar, that was a big thing that came out earlier in the week. They have said, we're not going to change that calendar. The individual school systems have to make a decision on when they're going to actually let students come back and be face-to-face with the coach.
So the rumor about football possibly becoming a spring sport next year are not true. Is that correct?
Well, that's not something that TSSAA has come out and said, no. Now, in terms of their internal talks, I can't necessarily speak for that, but I don't think we're at that point yet, to be honest with you. But it's like anything else. I think during this time, this goes for Dr. Webb, Ms. Goodwin, obviously Mr. Golden as well, everything's subject to change. You know, they have a plan right now, but you have to be flexible. I think most of us have taken this as, hey, let's hope for the best, but you have to prepare for the worst also. I think that's just realistic.
Right. What would you do if you were faced with a situation where the social distancing was still required when basketball season or wrestling season came around? Is there any creative way to deal with that, or is it just going to be another year without those sports?
Well, let's hope we don't get to that point. But you know, if you're talking about athletics, athletics is all about anti-social distancing, right? I mean, when you're playing football, it's kind of hard to social distance with your opponent. But you know, there may be some things you can do working out wise before we can get back together. And I think we have to, take an honest look at that and be creative in terms of what maybe we would suggest teams could do once we can get back together a little bit. And this will be phases like anything else, right? And we're going to take the local, state, and federal guidelines and maybe try to adjust that to not only our school system, but in my particular case, specifically in sports.
So we're just in a wait and see position for most of the sports at this point, it sounds like, and you haven't been able to make too many plans for the 2020-21 season.
Well, I think what happens, and I've had discussions with coaches and athletic directors, I think you have to make some plans. You plan. I had a basketball coach ask me the other day, he said, should I plan for my summer schedule and am I potentially wasting my time? I said, both. I think you have to plan. You can't just have it one day that, we can now get together and now you don't have a plan. So the coaches are doing a good job of that. I think maybe a perception that some may have, not many, but some, is that this has just been time off for coaches, but not really. They've done a good job of talking to one another, whether I'm the baseball coach and I'm talking to my fellow baseball coaches about, hey, when we can get back together, are we going to modify our schedule? And then obviously we got to a point eventually where we ended up shutting the season down. So in a lot of ways, that's a big time emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. And I'll tell you this, I appreciate TSSAA in the fact that they tried to put that off as long as they could.
Mm-hmm.
Some maybe thought that was more of a PR move, but I don't think so. I think they were hoping that we could have the basketball state tournament. And I'm biased, but I think the Nolensville girls basketball team was going to be a state champion. I really do. And that's too bad for that program and Coach Ladd and those young ladies in that school. But I appreciate that they tried to make that happen. But at some point, obviously, it just couldn't happen.
Right. Dr. Golden, the certainly a challenging year. The one thing we skipped over earlier that I wanted to talk about just a little bit is the budget. You just passed a new budget just in the last couple of weeks, and that also could be a thing, something that gets changed as the year goes on. Obviously, a lot of our tax revenue comes from sales tax that may not be coming in this year near in the way it usually is. What are your plans there and how do they adjust? Where do you cut first?
Well, first, we had actually already prepared our draft budget and had given it to our board for discussion right about when COVID-19 hit and the budget meeting was canceled. I've had a number of conversations with Mayor Rogers Anderson about the budget, and you've hit it on the head. The sales tax is the biggest challenge because we don't know what that's going to look like. It's pretty obvious that it's changed drastically in the last month. I've had a lot of conversations with our finance director, and the sales tax numbers tend to come in about 2 months after it actually happens. So we haven't seen any sales tax numbers yet for March or April. Of course, we're in late April as we're doing this, having this conversation. So what the county leaders asked us to do, and what our board did, was in essence vote on a status quo budget. We started from scratch. We revamped the budget based on our existing budget year. This budget year is fine because we do run in arrears. But next year's budget is where we're worried. And so the only thing our board put in our budget for this coming year is actual teacher growth, knowing that we are still expected to experience some growth. So we eliminated funding for a lot of those positions that from a strategic standpoint were designed to make us better. I think that's what you're going to see across the state and across the country, and maybe even across the world, that we're going to probably have a little bit of a flat line because it's going to be a recovery period. So you mentioned that the budget might change. When those numbers come in and as needs arise, we've let the county government know that we may come to you with some amendments. If we have the capacity to do something that we really felt like we needed to do, but it got cut because of COVID-19, it's possible that later on in this budget year, we may come and say, hey, look, we really need blank. We cut it because we didn't know what the numbers were going to look like. So a lot of what we do, not just locally, but everywhere, depends on those economic plans that the governor's putting together. He closed schools, and then just a few days later said he's developing his plan for that economic recovery. I do believe again that those large public gatherings such as athletics that we just talked about and what we're doing with students is going to be late on that continuum. But as May 1st hits and the governor's stay-at-home order lifts, we're optimistic about where we're going to go. But it's going to be a very lean budget year. We cut out raises as an example, even though the governor did include in his budget some funds for that. We have a zero raise. There is a schedule for teachers, what we call a step increase, because we pay teachers based on their experience. But nobody's getting a raise. That pay schedule is going to stay the same this coming year as it is this year.
I think that's understandable. Lee Webb, any last words for remote learning and what the parents and grandparents and students need to be preparing themselves for?
Well, I think preparing themselves for just continued interaction through the end of the year. I think that, as you mentioned earlier, some students are wondering, school's closed for the end of the year. At what point do we stop? We stop at the end of the school year. The end of May is when we stop. So our teachers are continuing to be creative, think about different ways to engage their students, and we're going to continue pushing content and interacting each week. Our secondary folks all have a scheduled time each week for their content area. So I'll use that English 1 example that I used earlier. So all English 1 students at one school know that there's a certain time of their day or week that's dedicated just to that content area, interacting with their teacher, whether it's on their digital classroom or via email or phone calls that are going to be coming out, or participating in a Zoom video conference such as we're doing right now. We're going to continue to space it out and keep pushing content and interacting with our students.
Deal. Denise Goodwin even wrote it down and then still forgot to ask you about the summer childcare. Those meals that the kids get at school every day are very important to a lot of the families out there, and then your summer childcare program is very important to a lot of folks that have to work. How is that shaping up? And if you will, our time is short, so just give us the bare details, if you will.
Sure. We are working with food distribution at 2 of the elementary schools, Westwood Elementary and Longview, and it's posted on our website for families looking for food. Part of the individualized checking in with families is to check on things like that. What can we do? There's other services besides academics that Williamson County is offering. We have social workers, we have resources that we can share. To the school-age child care program for the summer camp, we have a meeting today to discuss it. One of the primary goals will be safety and security for everyone involved. And while it may not be a full-blown summer camp, we will look to help those families with essential workers that need to go back. Hopefully, I can't make promises, but we will be looking at that.
Great. So much appreciate the time y'all took to share with us what's going on behind the scenes and out in front of us all as well. But we, I think, are better informed now. We appreciate you taking the time and being with us this morning. We want to make our audience aware that we will be doing a special show next Friday morning, May 1st. Senator Jack Johnson, who is our Senate Majority Leader and also a member of the Governor's Economic Recovery Team, is involved in a lot of the planning behind getting this world back to normal. And he is going to share a lot of those details with us next Friday morning, same time, and 7:30. And we will be broadcasting that on WCTV and WAKM as well. So just wanted to make you aware of that. The governor's target date to put the state back to work is May 1st, and that will be the date for our next show. So appreciate our sponsors, Vanderbilt, AT&T, for helping financially keep us going. Chamber staff, Kel, Matt, Abby, Nancy, Griffin. Takes a team to put this all together every month. And Creed Henderson over at WCTV, you do a wonderful job making us look better than we really deserve. Tom on WAKM 950 as well. We appreciate your help. Hope you all be back with us next Friday morning, 7:30. Again, thanks so much for everyone being with us this morning. Have a good day.